All right, we now have quorum, and we are going to start the regular business meeting of the Commission on Police Practices. We're going to do a couple of business items, and then we will do the community hearing starting at 5 o'clock. So I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome everyone for coming. And Ms. Condi, can you do the roll call, please?
Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. Chair Gloria Tran. Thank you. First Vice Chair Dennis Brown. Here. Thank you. Second Vice Chair Doug Case. Thank you. Commissioner Aguilar. It's not here yet. Commissioner Armentrout. Here. Thank you. Commissioner Benitez. Here. Thank you. Commissioner Byer. Here. Commissioner Kansen. Not here yet. Commissioner Chatsky.
Here.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Diaz. Commissioner Dockstader. Thank you. Commissioner Flores. It's not here yet. Commissioner Griffin Jones. It's not here yet. Commissioner Harvey. Here. Commissioner Hilbert. Here. Commissioner Honoré. Here. Commissioner Justice. Here. Commissioner Lawton. Not here yet. Commissioner Mendoza. Here. Thank you. Commissioner Momat. Here. Commissioner Ortega. It's not here. Commissioner Robinson. Thank you. Commissioner Rocha Vasquez. It's not here yet. And Commissioner Rodriguez. It's not here yet. Thank you. That concludes roll call.
Thank you, Ms. Condi. Now, if we can look at the minutes, does anyone have any proposed changes? I actually do. If we can get rid of the ad hoc personnel committee joint meeting at the very top, since that wasn't a joint meeting. Okay, any other changes? With the amendments? Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Justice, do I have a second? Commissioner Benitez, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? Unanimous. Thank you. Sorry, I'm getting used to this mic. Okay, so we're going to move on to the non-agenda public comment. Do we have any non-agenda public comments?
Chair Tron, we have one request to speak for non-agenda public comment. Actually, we have two requests to speak. We will start 2 minutes apiece. 2 minutes apiece. Kate Yavendetti.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kate Yavendetti. I'm with Women Occupy San Diego and the National Lawyers Guild. And I just want to compliment I wasn't here at the last meeting on the police pursuit policy, but you guys did a remarkable job. And I just want to tell you that. It was well-researched, well-written. It's exactly, you guys are doing exactly what we had envisioned when we wrote Measure B and got it passed. And I also want to tell you, I could see it already in the media, that you're getting pushback from the police department, which of course is no surprise to any of you, especially your executive director. Stay strong. The community supports you. I just want you to know that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Evie Kosover. Okay, you have 2 minutes, starting now.
Hi, my name is Evie Kosower, and some of you know me, and you certainly hear me on some of your Zoom meetings. I'm going to talk about something that I have once before, but I want to really make it kind of clear. The meeting minutes often sound like a repeat of the agenda, except saying it's happened. Those are not minutes. Minutes really are supposed to let you know what happened at the meeting, have a feeling about what went on, have some idea of what some of the comments have been, even from the community. So they should be expanded, and I would hope you would look at doing that, because they are the record. Your Zoom meetings aren't, and often they're not really able to be heard very well. So I am requesting that perhaps you look at that so that you can get a real feeling of what happened to some of those items, rather than that they just happened. Thank you.
Thank you. It's my understanding, Chair Tran, that we have one more request to speak in person. I do not have it yet, so we will go. We have 2 requests to speak on non-agenda, and we will go to Aaron Atkins. It's online, and he's coming over now. You have 2 minutes, Aaron Atkins. Aaron Atkins, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Aaron Atkins, can you check
Yeah, can
your
you hear me?
audio on your end?
I'll just say it really quick. My name's Aaron Adkins. I'm a lived experience expert myself. I hold the seat of vice chair on the Juvenile Justice Commission, and I heard about this group on NPR this morning and researched it really fast. I'm here to just promote what we do with the Juvenile Justice Commission. We're looking to increase our memberships. Our purpose is to annually inspect all publicly administered juvenile institutions and any jail lockups within the county that are used for the confinement of minors for more than 24 hours. I can leave some information with you all or be present at your next meeting if there's anybody that's interested. And I look forward to just developing some professional relationships with you all.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Francis Yasmin Motawala.
Hi. Thank you all for being on the commission and for all your work. I wanted to just share a strange experience. I had yesterday, some of us had organized a vigil in honor of Sonia Massey in Lemon Grove, Tregonza Park, near where the police held their event, and I everything was really beautiful day out, really great event. The one thing that really stood out, was weird to me, that I wanted to share was a statement that the I guess it might have been the DJ MC stated as he seemed to refer to us and say, "Hey Antifa, have you ever met a law enforcement agent before?" And then and so that was just strange to me, because I don't know, I guess he was calling the cops fascists. I don't know why he would have called us Antifa just because we were pointing out just some of the harms of policing that often get ignored, and some of the lives that have been impacted by police violence. So anyway, I just thought that was really strange that someone on the microphone from the event would just declare that we are Antifa, and also, I guess, state Antifa as if being an anti-fascist were some sort of bad thing, or I guess he might have been saying that the police were fascists. I don't know, but I just thought that was really strange, and I wanted to share that experience with you all. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Chair, we have one other request to speak in person on non-agenda item. It will be Dan Camarillo. Dan Camarillo, are you here? Dan Camarillo. Okay, Chair, that wraps up the request to speak for non-agenda.
Thank you, Executive Director Parker. We want to officially welcome our new commissioners. Jessica Dockstader, Dan Lawton, Viviana Ortega, Imani Robinson, and Gonzalo Rocha Vasquez. Some are still entering. Congratulations, and we look forward to working with you. And we'll hear more from you at a next meeting when we have more time. I just want you to be aware that a new code of conduct was recently approved for the City of San Diego boards and commissions. We verified that it does not apply to the Commission on Police Practices, as we are an independent commission. However, much of what is included in the code of conduct is already in our bylaws and in the NACOL, which is the National Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement Code of Ethics, to which we abide. So our policies are just fine in line, but we are independent. All right, just a reminder that the protocol to request a ride-along is to email Executive Assistant Alina Condi, and she will arrange it. We thank everyone who came out to provide feedback on the pursuit policy preliminary recommendations at our last meeting. Our goal is public safety for both residents and police, not letting criminals go free. We are in conversation with the chief about how the department will provide input so we can work collaboratively. We look forward to their input and welcome feedback from any and all stakeholders. The interim report proposed preliminary recommendations only, and those proposals were based on statistics and research, including looking at best practices by other departments. And just a technical note, when you speak, these are new mics for us. Please turn the mic on from the bottom where it says push, and please turn off the mic when you are done speaking. Now we turn it over to the Executive Director for his report. Mr. Parker.
Thank you. I want to provide a staffing update. As we know, we have a couple of current recruitments. The investigator recruitment is wrapping up. We will be making official offers to two candidates within the next week or so. The policy manager, I extended a conditional job offer that was accepted. If all goes well with background clearance, this person would start Tuesday, September 3rd. And then the senior management analyst, we are still looking over 100 plus applications for that position and hope to have a better update for you on the 21st. In reference to the audio-visual concerns that have been had over the last couple of months, that has been our top priority for the last 2 weeks, which is why you see the folks here. This should be the setup. These professionals in the back of the room should be the setup from here on out to address the concerns with the audio-visual. The CPP handbook, what we are going to do, we had a little bit of some printing issues. I was going to hand it out today, but on the 21st, what we'd like to do is give each of the commissioners and each staff member a CPP handbook, a basic handbook that has foundational materials in it to include the Brown Act, our operating plans, conflict of interest, POBAR, you name it, a resource manual for each commissioner to have with them, to read at their leisure, but also to refer to at their leisure, that serves as a foundational training. We know that many folks got that foundational training, but at least this will be where we're going to collate everything and give you things to add as we move forward. As far as new commissioner orientation, as mentioned earlier, we have 5 new commissioners. 3 of the 5 went through part 1 of a new commissioner orientation that was presented by Mr. Bennett, myself, and Commissioner Hopert. There you are. The other day, we talked about the basics before showing up to a meeting. Brown Act, conflict of interest, code of ethics, and confidentiality. There are obviously some other things like parliamentary procedures and whatnot that we'll cover in part 2. Those will also be about the charter, the history, the standard operating procedures, and then eventually we'll get to part 3 or whatnot about POBAR, prior to case reviews, POBAR, SDPD policies, things along those lines. So I want to let you know that with the help of the training committee, obviously the ad hoc training committee is taking the lead on this. We want to make sure that we get the training, document it, and give you a good resource moving forward. And then finally, the content of future executive director reports, time permitting, we would obviously do the staffing updates, activities, any kind of community outreach we've done, and then if there's time permitting, any kind of civilian oversight issues or trends locally, statewide, and national, so that everyone's on point moving forward. That concludes my executive director report.
Thank you so much. Did you hear feedback on his mic, gentlemen? Okay. So right now, we are going to break for 10 minutes, and at 5 o'clock sharp, we will start the community meeting. So there's some snacks and water in the back for our community members, and we will call this back to order in 10 minutes. Thank you.
We have 10 minutes now. Do you want to pause or do you want to? We have 10 minutes now. So sorry, I thought that's what the screen was supposed to look like.
But the thing is unmuted and I can't watch it.
I think so, yes.
can take their seats, please? Can everyone please take their seats? Hello? Can you hear? Thank you. We would like to get started if everyone can please take their seats. Thank you, Commissioner Honore. My mic isn't working, and I usually have no problem with my volume. But you're better. Oh, there we go. Thank you. All right. Now we are starting our community hearing on pretext stops. Good evening. My name is Gloria Tran, and I'm the chair of the Commission on Police Practices. On behalf of the Commission, I want to welcome you to our community hearing on pretext stops. We want to thank San Diego Police Chief Scott Wall and Neighborhood Services Branch Commander Ben Kelso for attending this meeting to listen to the community's concerns. What is a pretext stop? We'll hear more about that in a moment, but briefly, it's when police stop a vehicle for a minor violation as an excuse or pretext to conduct a search and look for other crimes. It's legal, but statistics show that people of color are pulled over for pretext stops at a much higher rate than whites. Pretext stops lead to a large number of complaints against the police department, which the Commission on Police Practices reviews. It also increases distrust between residents and police. The purpose of this hearing is to share information about pretext stops and its implications on the community, which our outside counsel, Mr. Dwayne Bennett, will do in just a moment, and to hear public testimony regarding the practice. The Commission will not respond to the testimony shared at this meeting. While tonight we'll hear from the community, we invite the police department and any other stakeholder to participate in the discussion. To ensure everyone has a chance to speak, we will establish a time limit for comments. Please be sure to turn in a speaker's slip to Ms. Obeid or Mr. Uribe by 5:30. They're sitting at that table near the door. If you are appearing virtually, please raise your hand by 5:30. To be fair to everyone, we will not accept speaker slips or virtual comment requests after that time. Once we determine how many speakers we have, in person and virtually, we will let you know how much time each person will have, hoping it's about 3 minutes. While we would like to go as long as needed, this facility closes at 8 p.m. and staff needs time to dismantle the setup. Therefore, we need to end by 7:30. The expectation is that everyone will speak respectfully. We now turn to the Commission on Police Practices outside General Counsel, Mr. Dwayne Bennett, to present information, background, and statistics on pretext stops. Mr. Bennett.
Okay, you all can hear me. Thank you, Chair. I'm Dwayne Bennett. Again, I'm outside counsel that's been designated to discuss this very, very important topic with you all. And I want to first of all thank our great paralegal, Judith Eze, for her hard work in preparing this PowerPoint. I've added legal context, as you can see, but I think it's a very well done PowerPoint. I want to say a couple of things opening up. First of all, pretext stops are not unique to the San Diego Police Department. Neither is racial profiling. It's a nationwide issue and problem. It's a California problem, and it's a San Diego PD problem. That's number one. Number two, nothing that I say and nothing that we're going to say about pretext stops is meant to infer, indicate directly or indirectly that this is about letting crime go free. This is not about letting crime go free. This is not about allowing drugs on the street, because I know you'll hear that. Unless you subscribe to the racist, discriminatory notion that the only people committing crime in the United States are black and brown, you cannot interpret anything I'm saying to infer that it's about allowing crime to run rampant. So let's get into it. What is, again, a pretext stop? As the chair said, it's where police pull you over for one reason when the real reason is something else. Whether you're pulled over for tinted windows, equipment violation, or something of the sort, when they really think you're a drug dealer and they want to do a criminal investigation, sometimes they will pull you over on a pretext stop. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, yep, you just skipped one. Next slide. Are pretext stops legal? As the chair said, yes, they are. How do we know? Because in a case entitled Wren versus United States, the court looked at it, the Supreme Court looked at it, and said that police are able, thank you, police are able to use pretext stops where they have what we call a reasonable suspicion belief that criminal activity is afoot. We'll talk about reasonable suspicion a little bit more so later. It's not advancing. Okay, let me just talk about Wren versus United States. And look, people, I apologize for going into legal diatribe and the legal analysis, but I need to do so. In Wren involved a plainclothes situation where officers believed that there was a high crime area and where criminal activity was afoot. What happened was they saw motorists drive and commit a traffic violation. They pulled that motorist over. They ultimately found drugs. What did the Supreme Court say? The Supreme Court said that even if another officer would not have pulled over that particular driver, it doesn't violate the Fourth Amendment. It's okay for officers to do so. Therefore, we have legally sufficient evidence that pretext stops are legal. Next slide, please. What are the racial implications of pretext stops? All right, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. In 1999, the Washington State Supreme Court took a real run at trying to deal with pretext stops in the state of Washington. In two cases, the court described and discussed pretext stops that I want to discuss. Next slide. In a case entitled State versus Ladson, the court really outlawed pretext stops in the state of Washington. And I want to quote to you what the court said. The court said, "We began our analysis by acknowledging the essence of this and every pretextual stop, traffic stop, is that the police are pulling over a citizen not to enforce a traffic code, but to conduct a criminal investigation unrelated to the driving. Therefore, the reasonable articulable suspicion that a traffic infraction has occurred which justifies an exception to the warrant requirement for an ordinary traffic stop does not justify a stop for criminal investigation." Court said no to pretext stops in the state of Washington. Next slide. The court went on to say that, however, the problem with a pretextual stop is that it is a search or seizure which cannot be constitutionally justified for its true reason, i.e. speculative criminal investigation, but only for some other reason, i.e. to enforce traffic code, which is at once lawfully sufficient but not the real reason. Pretext is therefore a triumph of form over substance, a triumph of expediency at the expense of reason, but it is against the standard of reasonableness which our Constitution measures exceptions to the general rule, which forbids search or seizure absent a warrant. Pretext is result without reason. Pretext is result without reason. And again, Commissioners, I want to get back to what I said earlier. This presentation is not about letting crime run rampant. It's about the Fourth Amendment's guarantee to everybody to be free from unreasonable search and seizure, and the 14th Amendment's guarantee to everybody to have due process, which is about fairness, objectivity, impartiality, and a process, as well as equal application of the law. Equal protection of the law applies to us all. Whether you're black, white, red, it doesn't matter. It should apply across the board. The court in Ladson pointed out the fact that there was unequal protection. However, next slide. In a case in 2012, the court modified its stance in terms of pretext stops in Washington and stated that an officer, as long as an officer had reasonable articulable suspicion that was an actual, conscious, and independent cause for a traffic stop, that's not a pretext stop that was prohibited in the state of Washington. Okay, so first, the state of Washington said no pretext stops. Then it relaxed the proscription and said, well, if an officer has an actual, independent, conscious belief that there is a traffic violation and can show that, that's not a pretext stop, and so the state of Washington relaxed that standard. Next slide. What happened after the state of Washington did that? Well, in an analysis of a data set of over 8 million traffic stops conducted by the Washington State Patrol from 2008 through 2015, the Stanford Law Review concluded that the Areola decision is associated with a statistically significant increase in traffic stops of drivers of color relative to white drivers. You see, as soon as the court relaxed the standard, what do we see? Black and brown people being pulled over in a disproportionate manner and in a disproportionate number in the state of Washington. And the data also revealed that when these stops took place, they took place in the daytime when officers could see the colors of the drivers. Next slide. If we look at pretext stops in the state of California and RIPA data, next slide, we come to the Los Angeles Police Department, which recently, in 2022, modified pretext policy. And just on a sidebar, I know something about the city of Los Angeles and LAPD and pretext and profile stops because in 1985, as a new attorney and as a prosecutor for the county of Riverside, I was coming home from church one night when I saw LAPD in my rearview mirror. Of course, I drive carefully when I see the police. As I proceeded through the intersection in South Central Los Angeles, they lit me up. They told me over the loudspeaker to stop. I got out of the car. When I got out of the car, I was confronted with 4 revolvers and 2 shotguns, all trained in me. Put my hands on my head like I was told to do. I was handcuffed, pushed me up against the side of the wall, and put a gun to my back. They threw me to the curb. And you know what? Commissioners, the only thing that kept me alive that night, because they were ready to shoot, they were in the ready shoot position, they were bladed, they were protected, they were ready to shoot. The only thing that kept me alive that night was there was a still small voice inside of me that said, don't move, don't say a word, be quiet, do not resist, because you'll die tonight. That's the only reason I'm here talking about this right now. I know what it means to be profiled in pretext. And you know what they told me later on that evening when they released me from custody? I asked them, why'd you guys pull me over? What did I do? They said, well, you fit the description. Of course I fit the description, because in my community, the description is always the same. In 2022, LAPD implemented a new policy aimed at reducing the number of pretext stops. The new policy restricts pretext stops in 2 ways. It limits the circumstances in which traffic stops can be made by officers, and it requires officers to articulate a reason to believe the person stopped has committed a serious crime. The policy went into effect March 1st, 2022. Next slide. What were the effects of the new policy? Now, I know these graphics are hard to see, but I just want you to pay attention to the second set of bar graphics to the left, because those are the stops for blacks. For black people, the population is in blue. The number of stops in 2021 are in green. The number of stops in 2022 are in orange. You can see that the number of stops far exceed the color blue. That means that black people in LA before and after the new policy were stopped at a far greater percentage than you would expect given their population. You see the high bars next to that? Those are the stops for brown people, Latinx. You can see that their stop data far exceed their population. Look all the way over to the right. On the right, you see a column where the blue data, or the blue bars, go way up. The orange and the green data, which represent stops in 21 and 22, are lower. Those are for white people. So you can see who is stopped, even in LA, and who profiled in LA relative to this RIPA data that was provided in 2024. Next slide. So what were the effects of LAPD's new pretext policy? Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, what are the effects of the new pretext policy in 2021 and 22? The data illustrates that black, brown, Latinx, and Pacific Islander individuals represented a larger percentage of stops in both 2021 and 22 relative to their percentage of the city's population, White, Asian, and multicultural individuals represented a lower percentage of stops in both 2021 and 2022. But after LAPD implemented its new pretext policy, the number of black individuals stopped slightly reduced, while the number of brown Latinx individuals slightly heightened. So there were mixed results, but at least the city of Los Angeles and LAPD is trying. Next. Across the state, this is what RIPA data shows. This is a racial identity profiling data. And what you'll see is across the state, the pattern is the same as you see here in San Diego. If you look at the second set of bar graphs, you see the blue and then you see orange. Those represent the stops of blacks. Okay, so the population is in blue, the stop data is in orange. The next column is Latinx, Hispanic. The population is in blue, the stop data is in orange. If you look all the way over to the right, you see the blue column is higher than the orange column. That represents whites. So throughout California, blacks and brown people are stopped at a far greater height or a far greater rate than white people. It's not just San Diego. Next slide. Some departments address bias in police because we know that there has to be a reason why these data indicate as such. They discuss explicit bias, which is obviously a conscious bias where we all know where people just say, I don't like you. They're explicit about it, it's obvious, it's out there. That type of bias operates consciously. Implicit bias is a type of subtle bias that may be unconscious and may affect attitudes or stereotypes that could affect why we see this disparity in policing. All right, next slide. San Diego PD has a non-biased policing policy. And the policy starts out very, very good. All right, some of the statements. The department does not tolerate bias-based policing. The department's commitment to non-bias-based policing includes providing all members with ongoing training related to biases, including implicit, overt, and bias by proxy, and all members are expected to understand their negative impacts on policing. Members shall not base any enforcement action in whole or part on race, color, ethnicity, religion, etc., while conducting any law enforcement activity, including stops and detentions. That's what this policy states. Next slide. However, there are some exceptions, and this is where the department has to look at the policy to see how it deems or whether it believes the policy is sufficient. It says, and I just quote portions of the policy, it says, if deficiencies are found, supervisors shall take appropriate action. The department will conduct regular internal reviews of stop data collected and work collaboratively with external experts to identify trends, unexplained disparities, and to develop changes to department operations as necessary to maintain equity in policing. Query, has that been done? All right, this is what the policy says. Regular training, regular analysis, to analyze disparities, to see about these trends, and to see from experts what needs to be done. Query as to whether or not that's been done. I don't know. Now, it goes on to say, and here's the interesting language. To me, as an attorney of 41 years, I've represented 5 different police departments. I've been a city attorney, I've been a general counsel, and I practiced in this area for a long time, but I find this language, to me, vague and ambiguous. This language that says, members seeking one or more specific persons who have been identified or described in part by their race, color, ethnicity, etc., may rely, in part, on a specified identifier or description only in combination with other appropriate identifying factors, and may not give the specified identifier or description undue weight. What does that mean to the average police officer? You tell me. What does it mean to you? Do you understand that language? And what is meant when the department says that you can or you may rely in part on the specified identifier or description only in combination with other appropriate identifying factors? What are those appropriate identifying factors? Policy doesn't specify what they are. Query as to whether or not this is appropriate guidance for the department in terms of non-bias. I leave that up to you. I leave that up to the department to ascertain. Next slide. Under Senate Bill 16, the law requires disclosure of sustained complaints of discrimination. Where you have a sustained complaint of discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, that involves police prejudice or discrimination against a person on the basis of race, religious creed, etc., those sustained complaints of discrimination must be disclosed. The question is whether or not you have sustained complaints of discrimination. You look at complaints in closed session. You review these complaints. Ask yourselves, when was the last time you sustained or you saw a sustained complaint of discrimination? You can answer that yourself. Next slide, please. I give you some historical accounts of data relative to the department and how discrimination complaints have been handled, just so you can track it. You can look at this information and you can see whether or not you, commissioners, and only you can do this because you see the cases in closed session, whether or not you see whether or not anything has changed or whether or not this is just a trend. In 2016-2017, 226 reported complaints. There were 226 reported civilian complaints. 11% were sustained. Out of the 21 civilian complaints of police discrimination, 75 use of force complaints, and 2 complaints alleging criminal misconduct, none of these complaints were sustained. Trend appears to continue. You continue to see complaints, and you have to answer, you, Commissioner, you yourself can answer the questions as to whether or not you are seeing complaints of discrimination sustained or not sustained. Next slide. Here's some data regarding racial profiling trends and citizen complaints from 2016 to 2019. Racial profiling now. 2016, 8 complaints, 0 sustained. 2017, 13 complaints, 0 sustained. 2018, 15 complaints, 0 sustained. 2019, 25 complaints, 5 were sustained. According to NBC data, 5 were sustained then, so we did see a little bit of change. But based upon these statistics, what trend do you see, or what trends can you assess? Next slide. I want to now move to talking about traffic stops in the city and relative to SDPD. Next slide. We see a lot of times that when people are stopped for traffic violations, officers will conduct consent searches. You know, under the Fourth Amendment, all searches, in order to search a person, you have to have a warrant. There are 3 exceptions, 3 basic exceptions to the warrant requirement. One is consent. If a person consents to being searched, they can be searched. Well, consent searches also require a lot of discretion on behalf of officers, because officers can decide who needs to be searched, who should be searched, who should not be searched. Well, when we have these traffic searches, we see a lot of searches often. And according to stop data provided by San Diego Police in the 3 quarters from 2018 to 2019, there were 2,565 searches where police reported no basis for the search other than consent. Next slide. Why is this issue interesting and why is it probative? Because consent searches are also more likely to be discretionary and vulnerable to racial bias. San Diego Police searched 6,614 people after pulling them over for an alleged traffic violation in 2019. The data illustrated that San Diego police were more likely to pull over people of color for equipment violations where police have substantial discretion, i.e. driving without a brake light. After being pulled over, and there's a typo in this slide, so I need to correct it now. After being pulled over for a traffic violation, San Diego PD were 44% more likely to search Latinx people and 133% more likely to search black people compared to their white counterparts. Next slide. Data in 2021 analyzed pursuant to San Diego PD indicates that at traffic stops, blacks were searched 2.6 times more often as white people. Okay, searches of blacks on the left relative to searches of whites on the right. Next slide. The data also indicates that at traffic stops, Latinx people were searched 2.3 times as often as white people. Searches of Latinx on the left, searches of white on the right. Next slide. And also at traffic stops, Asian people were 0.8 times as often searched as often as white people. So they were searched less than white people. Next slide. San Diego PD has, under policy 4.01, its stop, detention, and pat-down procedures. And it defines the detention, appropriately as under the law, as a stop when officers use their authority to compel a person to halt, remain in a certain place, or perform some act, et cetera, et cetera. It also appropriately decides or indicates that reasonable suspicion is what is required to stop a person. And reasonable suspicion, it says, is a term that is not capable of precise definition. It is more than a hunch or mere speculation on the part of an officer, but less than probable cause necessary for arrest. All right? When you're dealing with reasonable suspicion and these stop incidents, officers have broad discretion. How is that discretion being used? Query. The policy also does say that reasonable suspicion, it should not, or one of the predicates for stopping people should not be perceptions of high crime areas. Next slide. Just 90 days ago, the California Supreme Court restricted how police officers can conduct detention searches. Very, very important case. In the case of People versus Marlin, that just was decided May 2nd, 2024, Officer Guy suspected Mr. Flores of loitering for the use of cells or narcotics in a gang area. Guy gave no reason why he thought so other than the area and Flores' suspicious behavior upon seeing police. Commissioners, go back to your case review and see if any of this sounds familiar. During a pat-down search of his car, Guy pointed a flashlight and saw what looked like a drug pipe. In invalidating the detention, the California Supreme Court said, in short, and I'm just quoting parts of the opinion, in short, Officer Guy failed to articulate more than an inchoate and unparticularized suspicion or hunch of criminal activity. But before an officer can compel compliance with a show of authority, articulable facts must support a reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. In the absence of such facts, a person is constitutionally protected and empowered to go on his or own way. Next slide. Perhaps the most powerful and prominent aspect of this opinion, however, is the concurrent opinion by Justice Evans. And please indulge me, but I really, really need to read this to you because the California Supreme Court went from invalidating the detention to discussing racial profiling, to discussing the fear and distrust that people of color have relative to the police officers, to the deaths that we've seen, and to indicating, or to an indication as to why profiling and disproportionate stops are inappropriate. I'm just going to quote parts of this concurrent opinion by the California Supreme Court. This is not me, an angry black man, okay? Not me. California Supreme Court. And I quote, the court said, as numerous judges before us have recognized, many individuals, including particularly people of color, commonly hold a perception that engaging in any manner with police, including in seemingly casual or innocuous ways, entails a degree of risk to one's safety. Among such citizens, particularly minorities and those residing in high crime areas, there's also the possibility that the fleeing person is entirely innocent, but with or without justification, believes that contact with the police can itself be dangerous. This perception is based on the unfortunate and long-standing realities of policing in many minority communities across the country, as well as the police killings of Oscar Grant, Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Akai Gurley, Tamir Rice, Calvin Reed, Anthony Hill, Eric Harris, Dante Ivey, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray. And the court lists and names 30 other black people who've been killed at the hands of police. Now we go from talking about detentions and profiling and pretext stops and people saying that you're allowing criminals out in the street to the California Supreme Court listing and doing a roll call of black people who've been killed at the hands of police. Add Sonia Massey to that name, to that roll call. The court says, despite growing recognition of the deep-seated issues in policing in our country, it is still the case that communities of color disproportionately experience heightened levels of police scrutiny and racial profiling. Not only are black people stopped and searched more often, but such searches are less likely to yield evidence of contraband. A recent report found that out of more than 4.5 million law enforcement stops recorded throughout California in 2022, black individuals are stopped 131.5% more frequently relative to their proportion of the population, and Hispanic individuals comprise the largest racial group of stopped individuals. The court goes on to say, today's opinion notes that some courts have begun accounting for the impact of racial disparities in policing in the totality of the circumstances analysis. So all police departments in California are on notice. The California Supreme Court is saying these disparities that we see black and brown people being disproportionately stopped is not acceptable. And if something needs to be done, I don't know what it is to be done. I don't know. I'm not here suggesting you what should be done. Community can suggest, the department can suggest, officers of the department can suggest, you can suggest. I just present the information for you. Next slide. If we examine non-traffic data, what do we see? Next slide. There's also an obvious disparity between racial groups similar to the ones observed in Los Angeles. And this is in San Diego. Black individuals were 6.2% of the population, but were 23% of non-traffic stops compared to other ethnic groups. That's here in San Diego. Next slide. In situations where San Diego police had more discretion, racial disparities in search outcomes were more severe. Police were less likely to find contraband on black and Latinx people than white people during these types of searches where officers had the most discretion, indicating the racial bias. This is the data. Okay, this is the data. This is what the statistics say. This is not what I say. Black and brown people are stopped at a disproportionately high rate, and then when they search, you don't find contraband on them, like you do relative to white people. Next slide. People perceived to have mental disabilities were 81% more likely to be searched and 172% more likely to experience police use of force than people who are not perceived to have a disability. So you can imagine if you're black or you're brown and you have a disability, you're really going to get hit. And this is also not anything to disparage white people. This is not an anti-white presentation. This is a presentation about equal protection, equal law for everybody. Next slide. There are few theories as to why these disparities exist across America, and these are from experts. Police bias is the first. In a review of 5 major police departments, California state auditors found that none of the departments have fully implemented best practices to mitigate the effects of police bias. Hotspot policing. Specialized teams are created in police departments to address specific criminal activities such as drug crimes. Study found that there are higher racial disparities in traffic stops where there are hotspots compared to cities where there are not hotspots. Neighborhood crime rate and poverty data does account for some of these stops, but the experts say it accounts for 36% of the stops, where 64% are not explained by the high crime and by poverty. Next slide. In order to stop a person, in order to arrest a person, probable cause there must be probable cause. Next slide, or next point, there you go, thank you. In terms of probable cause, there is no color predicate. Probable cause is color neutral. It's not black, it's not white, it's not brown. So probable cause should apply to everybody the same way. What is probable cause? It's a reasonable ground for belief in the existence of facts warranting an arrest or search. It exists where the facts and circumstances would warrant a person of reasonable caution to believe that an offense was or is being committed, and it is the existence of circumstances which would lead a reasonably prudent person to believe in the guilt of the arrested party. There's no color there. Do you see black or brown there? So why is it being used disproportionately against black and brown people across the nation? Next slide. If you don't have probable cause, you need reasonable suspicion. We skip the slide. In reasonable suspicion, you've heard that topic and that term, but it comes out of a case entitled Terry versus Ohio, where the court held that if a police officer has a reasonable suspicion to believe that a person has committed, is committing, or is about to commit a crime, and has a reasonable belief that the person may be armed and presently dangerous, officer may stop and search the individual. That's reasonable suspicion. All right? And the department says that it's not, can't be clearly defined, and that's true. That is true. But where the officer has a reasonable belief that a person has committed, is committing, or is about to commit a crime, they can stop a person based upon the reasonable suspicion analysis. Next slide. Again, there is no color in reasonable suspicion. The definition of reasonable suspicion is color neutral. All right, how do we address the disparity in San Diego, these disparities in the department? Next slide. RIPA data. Oh, I think we might have skipped the slide. Excuse me. Oh, I did. I'm sorry. Cases reviewed by the commission suggest that at the assignment level, the gang unit, special enforcement unit, task force officers stop black and brown people at a rate or in a manner that generates complaints. Perhaps the department wants to look at the deployment of these units to see why these complaints are generated based upon these activities and how they're affecting people of color. Next slide. RIPA regulations currently prevent the public from accessing data showing ID numbers of officers making each stop. And the department cannot reveal this information because it's law. However, arguments have been made that access to the full data set could be used to track the spread of misconduct through discrimination over time and perhaps predict which officers are doing what. Again, keep in mind that SB 16 affords access to sustained complaints of discrimination, but it does not give the broad parameter relative to RIPA data. There's really nothing that you can do about this at this point in time. There's nothing that the department can do about it because it's state law and police officers have confidential rights. They have confidential and they have constitutional rights that are not subject to watered down efforts. Next slide. In an effort to address pretext stops, AB 2773 was passed and implemented effective January the 1st, 2024. And this Assembly bill requires officers to announce the reasons why a person is stopped. And it also requires the department to track whether or not officers are doing this. So this is an effort to address pretext stops and the impact particularly on communities of color. Next slide. There's also in the making Senate Bill 50. Senate Bill 50 was proposed in 2023 to restrict officers from stopping people for certain minor infractions. The Prosecutor Alliance of California argued that pretext stops fail to meaningfully improve public safety and result in profiling of individuals. This bill, quote unquote, would prohibit a peace officer from stopping or detaining the operator of a motor vehicle or bicycle for a low-level infraction as defined, unless a separate independent basis for a stop exists or more than one low-level infraction is observed. Again, all of these efforts, whether it be the state of Washington, whether it be the LAPD, are trying to drill down in terms of what constitutes reasonable suspicion for a stop. People are trying to get more, and the California Supreme Court holding in Flores is saying the same thing, that you got to come up with more than I have a hunch that this person is engaged in crime. I know how those people operate. I know how this gang associates. I know that this gang associates in this area, etc. You need more than that. Courts are saying you need more than that. Next slide. There is opposition to Senate Bill 50. Those opposing the bill expressed concern that by reducing pretextual stops, officers could lose the ability to detain an individual to investigate an unrelated hunch and potentially discover contraband. In support of this argument, they referenced several individual cases where narcotics or weapons were seized during a pretext stop. However, according to RIPA data, a vast majority of pretext stops do not yield contraband. Next slide. Perhaps there should be some reflection on what happens at the federal level. In the federal law, federal officers are constrained in terms of using race. When conducting traffic stops, federal law enforcement officers may not use race, ethnicity, gender, national origin, religion, sexual orientation, etc., but they can only rely on these listed characteristics for suspect description. And when conducting traffic stops, federal law enforcement officials may consider race, ethnicity, gender, etc., only if it is trustworthy and relevant to the locality, that individual to identify criminal incident, scheme, or organization, a threat to national homeland security, etc. So under federal law, they require more than this basic, vague language relative to stops or the ability to conduct pretext stops. All right, next slide. What are some benefits? Oh, we skipped one. What are some benefits? And this is just in my mind, commissioners, you don't have to rely on this. You don't have to accept anything I'm saying, okay? But I wonder what are some of the benefits to just changing the status quo, to trying to fix pretext policies. Well, number one, increase accountability and public trust in non-biased policing. If you want the public to trust that you're doing the job right and that you're not engaging in discrimination, try to work on this pretext practice and see if we can improve it. Number two, fewer complaints and investigations against officers for complaints of discrimination, racial profiling, illegal detention, and courtesy. I mean, we don't think about this very often, commissioners, but do you know that police officers are subject to complaints? That works it works trauma and an emotional toll on them. Some of these complaints hang over their head for up to a year. And what officer wants to be accused of discrimination and profiling? What officer wants that? That officer doesn't know if they're going to be reprimanded. They don't know if they're going to be suspended. They don't know if they're going to be transferred. They don't know if they're going to be demoted. They don't know if they're going to be terminated. And if there's a sustained complaint of discrimination, that information can become public. So fewer complaints of investigations against officers for discrimination seems like it's a good idea for the department as well as the commission. Again, the lessen the emotional toll on officers subject to citizen complaints and accused of misconduct for discrimination. Fewer pitches motions. A pitches motion is a discovery motion that's brought in court to access a peace officer's personnel file. Pitches motions are often brought where complaints of discrimination or use of force are involved. So, a criminal suspect will say, hey, look, I want to get into that peace officer personnel file to see what other stuff or what other black people or brown people they've stopped, or to see if they have a track record of bias and discrimination. Fewer pitches motions if we could do something about pretext policies, and fewer McGill motions. A McGill motion is a motion for selective prosecution. As a prosecutor, I used to deal with McGill motions when black and brown people said, hey, you only singled me out and I'm only here because I'm black or I'm brown. It's selective prosecution. It's unconstitutional. So some of the benefits to trying to fix this could be those. Next slide, a few recommendations. Again, just in my head, acknowledgement of disparate impacts on people of color. You cannot do anything to address this if you don't acknowledge that it's a problem. Have to acknowledge the disparate impacts on people of color. The statistics show that, the practices show that. You as commissioners, you review complaints so you can decide for yourself. Hold accountable those supervisors or officers who direct the order or order the pretext stop as opposed to officers down the line. In some cases, you commissioners see complaints against officers who are really not the officers who did anything except comply with an order. Sometimes the order to pretext or to pull a person over comes from somebody behind the scenes, a supervisor, or somebody in a special unit. Hold the officer who dictated or directed the pretext stop liable, or at least make them the subject officer, as opposed to the officers just carrying out the directive. Revision and review of policy 9.31 to at least add some more predicate or parameters for officers in terms of stops, to remove the vagueness and ambiguity that I referenced regarding the use of race or ethnicity in stops. I'm not certain. You know, the department can speak for itself, and officers for the department can speak for themselves and tell me I'm crazy, but that language is awfully vague, and I don't know that it's clear to the average police officer, and it's clear in terms of what the department is trying to convey. Strict compliance with the policy relative to non-biased policing regarding training and external experts to identify inequities, disparate patterns. Policy says that these patterns have to be identified, that they will be researched by experts, that there will be recommendations, there will be training, etc. Has that been done? If not, I think it should be done. Next slide. Expanded alternatives for low-level offenses. Instead of pulling everybody over for traffic violations or I mean, look, if a person commits a traffic violation, they commit a traffic violation, you're going to pull them over. I get that. But some of these low-level offenses that are predicates for pretext stops need to be reviewed, and there need to be some other alternatives as opposed to pulling people over and then asking for consent to search, doing consent, particularly when it's disparately used against black and brown people. Consideration of principles in the federal standard for law enforcement stops. Perhaps the department would like to look and consider what law enforcement is doing on the federal level, as well as, for example, the LAPD policy, which is at least an effort to do something. More scrutiny regarding the usage of consent searches. As I indicated, consent searches often are discretionary and end up hitting or end up being black and brown people more often. And again, improve data transparency, if we could, relative to RIPA. Next slide. Aren't you glad I'm at the summary page? Just to summarize, pretext practices and stops may be causing more harm than good. The disparity between the number of stops and the proportion of residential population is greater for people of color who are stopped more frequently and searched at higher rates than white individuals. Pretext stops may lead to more serious incidents or harm to those errantly stopped. I apologize for my emotion, but again, I've lived it, and as an African-American man, it is a concern. Pretext stops contribute to hotspot policing, where agencies use data to determine areas to concentrate police forces, and much of crime data, crime-based data, is from heavily based police areas, which reinforce the notion that over-policed areas require further police surveillance. This creates a negative cycle we see in pretext stops. Next slide. So I just want to conclude by going back to what the Washington State Supreme Court said about pretext stops. Again, remember the court said a pretext is therefore a triumph of form over substance, a triumph of expediency at the expense of reason. Pretext is result without reason. And this same Washington State Supreme Court in 2020. You know, people tend to forget what was going on in 2020 in this country. There are a lot of black people dying at the hands of police, leading up to George Floyd. Well, in 2020, this same Washington State Supreme Court penned a letter to the judiciary and to members of the legal community. And this letter is prescient to this very issue that we're discussing tonight. It is also prescient to the California Supreme Court's decision in Flores. It's written on the court's letterhead, and I'd just like to close by reading this letter to you. I think it bears on this issue. And again, this is the Washington State Supreme Court. Dear members of the judiciary and the legal community, we are compelled by recent events to join other state Supreme Courts around the nation in addressing our legal community. The devaluation and degradation of black lives is not a recent event. It is a persistent and systemic injustice that predates this nation's founding. But recent events have brought to the forefront of our collective consciousness a painful fact that is, for too many of our citizens, common knowledge. The injustices faced by black Americans are not relics of the past. We continue to see racialized policing and the overrepresentation of black Americans in every stage of our criminal and juvenile justice systems. Our institutions remain affected by the vestiges of slavery, Jim Crow laws that were never dismantled, and racist court decisions that were never disavowed. The legal community must recognize that we all bear responsibility for this ongoing injustice, and that we are capable of taking steps to address it if only we have the courage and the will. The injustice still plaguing our country has its roots in the individual and collective actions of many, and it cannot be addressed without the individual and collective actions of us all. As judges, we must recognize the role we have played in devaluing black lives. This very court once held that a cemetery could lawfully deny grieving black parents the right to bury their infant. We cannot undo this wrong, but we can recognize our ability to do better in the future. We can develop a greater awareness of our own conscious and unconscious biases in order to make just decisions in individual cases, and we can administer justice and support court rules in a way that brings greater racial justice to our system as a whole. As lawyers and members of the bar, we must recognize the harms that are caused when meritorious claims go unaddressed due to systemic inequities or the lack of financial, personal, or systemic support. And we must recognize that this is not how a justice system must operate. Too often in the legal profession, we feel bound by tradition and the way things have always been. We must remember that even the most venerable precedent must be struck down when it is incorrect and harmful. The systemic oppression of black Americans is not merely incorrect and harmful, it is shameful and deadly. Finally, as individuals, we must recognize that systemic racial injustice against black Americans is not an omnipresent specter that will inevitably persist. It is the collective product of each of our individual actions, every action, every day. It is only by carefully reflecting on our actions, taking individual responsibility for them, and constantly striving for better that we can address the shameful legacy we inherit. We call on every member of our legal community to reflect in this moment and ask ourselves how we may work together to eradicate racism. As we lean in to do this hard, necessary work, may we also remember to support our black colleagues by lifting their voices. Listening to and acknowledging their experiences will enrich and inform our shared cause of dismantling systemic racism. We go by the title of justice, and we reaffirm our deepest level of commitment to achieving justice by ending racism. We urge you to join in these efforts. This is our moral imperative, and is signed by all 9 justices of the Washington State Supreme Court. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett, for that very thorough and personal presentation. I'd like to invite folks to come get seats before we start the public comment. There's seats, and we're bringing out more seats so everyone can be part of the conversation. So please, if you're standing up, we have seats for everyone. Thank you, Ms. Obeid and Mr. Uribe. All right, anyone else would like to come and sit down? Okay, after getting all the public comment, speaker slips online and in person, we have 3 minutes per speaker. Mr. Parker, will you call the first speaker, please?
I will. We have 23 requests to speak, 22 in person and 1 online, 3 minutes per. And I apologize, I know that the topic is emotional and whatnot, but we will be at 3 minutes, and I'll be the one interrupting you and telling you your time is up. So thank you for that understanding in advance. With that, Kate Yavendetti.
Thank you, and hello again. My name is Kate Yavendetti. I'm with Women Occupy San Diego and the National Lawyers Guild, and I just want to say that was an excellent presentation by Mr. Bennett, and it's really hard to add anything to that. But what's really at the core of all of this is there's no question that pretext stops are institutionalized racism. And that's what we're really talking about here. And not only do we have to deal with all the policies and procedures around pretext stops, but we have to deal with what's underlying that. And that is the racism and bias in law enforcement. And that's another question that I think that we need to get to. I'm not going to take my 3 minutes. As a lawyer, I wish I could. But I just want people to think about that when we're talking about what's going on with law enforcement. And I think that now we have a new chief. Hopefully he will hear us and he will work with us to get rid of the bias that we see over and over again. Mr. Bennett talked about his lived experience. My own family has a lived experience with that, and many people here do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will call Evie Kosover. Evie?
Hello, my name is Evie Kosower, and I am with Women Occupy as well. We have been interested in this, We've been interested in this topic for a long time, and I have particularly been interested in RIPA and have been listening in over the years to some of the discussions at the state level. They set up a wonderful group of people who broke up into small bits and pieces, worked very hard, came together monthly, and even more frequently. People were allowed to listen in, and I went to a place where they did have the audio come in and listen. So I know this is about really pretty hard in getting all of this information. It was very hard getting the police departments to collect it, and then to send it in, and then to let them know whether it was enough information to do anything with. This particular year, there have been, in this study, 506 departments, but it took a long time to get them. The last number that had been actually noticed was 58. So they really got after as many as they could. Mr. Bennett did a marvelous job really going through a tremendous amount. So if I repeat a little bit, Mr. Bennett, it may be because I couldn't hear everything really clearly. Again, I have a little of a problem with it, but I will try to pick up some things that you didn't say that I have taken from the report. First of all, there have been over 4,575,725 stops in the state by 560 agencies in the 1 year of 2022. It's a lot of stops, but you know, it's probably not all that were done. What's happened with those is that after all of the analysis, they have come out, RIPA has come out with some very clear recommendations, and I'm going to read some of those to you. One of the very statements they've made is very clearly there is racial bias, and I don't think that has ever been clearly admitted by our police department, that we've been showing it to them year after year. Besides the data analysis, the board issues best practice recommendations. that law enforcement agencies, legislature, local policymakers, the Commission on Police Officer Standards and Training.
Thank you, Ms.
And-
Keller. Thank you, ma'am. Your time is up. So sorry.
That my 2 minutes?
That was 3.
Oh,
So your time is up. So I'd like to call the next 5 speakers, just so there are no surprises. The next 5 in order will be Samantha Jenkins, Patricia DeArmond, Dave Dearman, Dan Camarillo, and Heather Friedman. So with that, Samantha Jenkins.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Samantha Jenkins. I'm a former chair of the Citizens Advisory Board for Police and Community Relations and a current member of the Southeastern San Diego Captains Advisory Board. But I'm here in my capacity as an independent citizen to speak to the issue of recommendations regarding pretext stops. I think it's really critical that we look first to the title, pretext, the notion that an officer can create any mental condition within himself to determine his justification for stopping a person who more often than not is going to be black and brown and or from a marginalized community. That alone is the foundation of a problem. And I'd like to say that while we speak so often about training as being a strong resource for modifying police practice and police behavior, we know that no amount of training can remove bias. And all human beings live with bias. So while we spend more and more dollars engaging in police training, we are not changing the outcomes of police practices. I'd like to offer 4 recommendations for consideration. I'd like first to say that I believe every entity that exists in San Diego County and City who has looked at the issue of police reform has at some time offered a recommendation regarding a moratorium or a stop altogether to the use of pretext stops, and I invite you all to offer a recommendation of the same. Every study that has ever been done, to my knowledge, regarding policing outcomes and policing practices in San Diego have demonstrated a clear and disparate impact on communities of color, on low-income communities, on the LGBT community, as well as community members among us who live with mental health challenges. The disparate impact of our policies and procedures has been consistent. So I offer these 4 recommendations. Number 1, create clear definitions of acceptable criteria that meet the level of articulable information. Number 2, review the impact of crime reports on jurisdictions that have removed the use of pretext stops in their policing practices. Number 3, create a clear standard and policy for discipline related to stops that rely on pretext and find no criminal activity or contraband. And number 4, employ a moratorium as a period of study of crime stats while permanent policies are developed in addition to accompanied training for officers. Thank you, that's all I have to offer.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we will call Patricia Darman.
Good evening, everyone. My brother was Christopher DeArmond, who lost his life on January 20th, 2023 due to a pretext stop from a third brake light. He had not committed any crime. The only crime he committed at that time was evade because, you know, as we all know, we go into fight or flight and we panic. My brother was not an evil guy. He would have never shot anybody with that gun. He wasn't going around. These pretext stops have to end because they're pulling up excuses from whatever little knowledge that they can think of at the top of their head, and they're using those excuses to violate our rights, to tell us our words mean nothing because you're an ex-felon, because of your previous history. Yes, we do have the right, but no, they don't. Number one, marijuana is legal. Number two, he had no more than 15 grams on him. You're allowed to have up to 15 grams. How can you be illegally transporting when you only have about a gram or two on you? And yes, these are prejudice actions that the police are taking against us because they're prejudging our people based on what they look like, what they're dressed like, where they're at, what kind of truck they're in. That will be their cause to surveil them and violate their rights and put them in a corner where they cannot get themselves out of. Regardless of anything they say or do, nothing can help them in that moment, and nobody deserves to hear a frantic phone call from their loved one where they are fearing for their life when they're in the hands of the law. And I made the mistake of trusting that those cops would do due process to my brother. And they didn't. They failed. They murdered. They sent a dog. They withheld aid. They let him bleed out for over 45 minutes. They shot over 28 bullets at my brother. 9 entered his body, 2 grazed him. They said he was playing possum, could be faking it. How can somebody get shot at that many times and still be faking it? I want to see the footage where he had enough strength to flip them off. Yes, he told them F you, and yes, they deserved it because they were ending his life and he knew it. I hope that my brother's life can bring some change to this corrupt and prejudiced system. There has to be something that we can do to stop doing these pretext stops. They're ending too many lives. They're sending people to jail. We're losing our loved ones. Maybe they don't value their life because they're an ex-felon, but we value our family members. And the cop's life don't mean more than ours. And qualified immunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will call Dave Darman.
Well, I'm glad we're here discussing pretext stop, one in which resulted in inexperienced officers' action resulted in the death of my son, Christopher DeArmond. On the evening of January 23, Chris delivered a blanket to a needy friend in Barrio Logan. After being surveilled and followed, he was pulled over by 2 officers, Aguilar and Myers. Each of the officers had less than 3 years' experience. Both are listed on Cop Watch. Each officer positioned themselves at each door. Myers displayed his police baton unsheathed in his hand, known as a show of force. The stated rationale was an inoperative third brake light. An officer, Sergeant Rene Murillo, 9-year veteran, elected to withhold application of medical attention. Not sure why. Interrogation, he also sprayed pepper spray into my son's face and let him drive off. The officers escalated the situation, telling him his words mean nothing. He'd been out of trouble for 3 years. He was threatened that they were going to yank him out of my truck. Chris drove a short distance, stopping at a traffic light, and then proceeded. My son was given verbal orders to raise his hands, which he tried to do. He said, "I can't." He'd been shot. Sometime later, the police officers deployed canine on his body. It is clear to me these 2 officers, inexperienced, acted out of fear and that they made a stereotypical judgment. In addition, additional 40 officers called to the scene, less than 50% used their body cam. Family members are never notified. The San Diego Police Department touts themselves as America's finest. I can be seen as the death of my son. Nothing can be further from the truth. I respectfully request this commission conduct a thorough, unbiased review of all evidence, interviews, body-worn cameras, and the written report itself. I might add that I speak with some authority. I'm a 30-year naval veteran, retired lieutenant commander. I'm a former naval-based San Diego police officer, security officer, and my training, unlike those 2, my training was at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center known as FLETC in Glencoe, Georgia. Even if it wasn't his father, I would tell you what I'm describing is totally unsatisfactory. It was a pretext stop resulting in my son's death. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we will call Dan Camarillo.
I'm here to support Chris de Armand's unjustified death, but I'm also here as a representative of the Chicano-Mexicano community who is afraid to come and make complaints about the atrocities that happen to them because of retaliation, because the police go back to our neighborhoods and they retaliate by pulling us over, investigating us for no reason, and bothering us. And so that's why a lot of the community members from the Chicano-Mexicano community are not here, because they're afraid. And the police keep doing it and doing it. You know, let me tell you, somebody asked me one time, they said, do you think all cops are bad cops? I said, you know what? No, I don't. But the problem is that the good cops don't stop the bad cops from doing what they're doing because they're acting like a gang. You know, is what they have this code of, you know, don't tell on each other. And so our community knows that they do that. They also stop medical attention because they're treating everybody like a criminal. They go in and all coming in saying this person has mental issues. And the first thing they do, instead of coming in sort of de-escalation tactic, they come in like acting like they're criminals already. They committed a crime, but they have mental problems. And I don't know how many, because you know the numbers on that presentation earlier are not the real numbers. The numbers are who knows what the numbers are more. But we'll never know because the police department doesn't turn in accurate data, no transparency there because they don't turn in stuff that's complete. And I heard this from the commission themselves that a lot of this stuff is just incomplete information. So how are we supposed to review these things when they don't turn in what they should? The other thing is the San Diego sheriffs or another police department is supposed to do the investigation on SDPD. So you're having law enforcement investigate law enforcement? Does that make any sense to it? Because it doesn't make any sense to me. You know, they work hand in hand, so that's not transparency. Having another department, law enforcement, investigate another law enforcement. It should be an independent investigation, so that this cover-ups and all these other things that we know about don't happen. That. So I want to say justice for Chris Norman, Noel Rojas, Shorty Ramirez, and the list goes on of people killed in our communities. And there's a list I'm sure goes on and on for the African American communities also. So I just want to say justice to all, and I hope we get some transparency, and that's all I want to say.
Thank you. As we call Heather Friedman, I will now read the list of the next 5 folks after Heather Friedman. Darwin Fishman, Michael Rios, Tasha Williamson, Curtis Swafford, and Musa Abdul Hafez. So Heather Friedman.
Yeah, getting up is difficult. No, I'm okay. I can stand up. I have medical issues, sorry. Okay, I belong to the Racial Justice Coalition in San Diego. I want you to know that. I arrived here in San Diego 1983 from Montreal, Canada. I went to live in Santee. Someone said to me it used to be called Clan T. I had no idea what the Klan was. I found out, and I was shocked, horrified, and angry, and I'm still angry. I learned what it's like to be a black man in this country. Through a very dear friend of mine, past 30 years. He's a Vietnam vet Marine. He's a religious person. He's a good person. Anyway, he was staying with me because he had no place to live and so on and so forth about 30 years ago. And I'm telling you the story because I don't think it's changed much. He had a VW Bug. He had 2 computers in the car, was going up to Escondido to try to train someone to help him open a business. He came back, sat in the back patio with his head in his hands and told me the story. He was stopped by a cop who pointed to a hat which had an X on it. Malcolm X movie came out that year. "What gang are you in?" he said to him. And then he said, "Where are the receipts for those computers?" He said, "They're old computers. Get out of the car." He sat on the sidewalk while a dog went into the car. They found nothing. They checked him out. They found nothing. This is what it was like, I discovered, to be a black person, and especially a black man in this country. And it makes me very angry. And I joined the Racial Justice Coalition of San Diego because I thought I could stand up and make and say something, do something. Martin Luther King's dream has not yet come true. And in fact, I think we're going backwards. And it takes too long to make changes. In my opinion, every person in this world is a human being, period. And it pisses me off when I see because of the color of someone's tone of skin that they get treated like that. It's wrong. And more white people, by the way, need to know about all of this. And I don't know how you're going to make that happen. But we need to let the white people know what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Darwin Fishman.
Good evening. Thank you, Darwin Fishman, he, him, his, Racial Justice Coalition San Diego. Thank you, Patricia, for your presentation, your family being here. And we love you, we support you. And thank you, Heather. I did want to add real quickly to this. Bennett, the presentation was really powerful, but I'll do the part what's left out. I'll take it, which is I used to be on the CRB. I did ride-alongs. I did ride-alongs with what was called the gang unit at that time. And you could call that unit the pretext unit. Almost 100% of their stops were pretext. They were very proud of it. And it's not a mystery what they're doing. They know that there's this is supposed to be for the entire city of San Diego, the gang unit. They went right into Southeast. This was a Friday night I was with them. They know that if they pull over enough black folks, they'll find ones that have a criminal history. It's like a bounty. That's their lifeblood for their work. They didn't arrest any gang members that night. They arrested a whole lot of folks for traffic stops, though. They tore up a whole lot of cars, and they proudly called it swatting. 4 or 6 cars, pull them over. Guns out or not guns out. So the problem where you got to connect the dots is with the pretext stops, you make it sound like it's something you can just outlaw, we're good to go, and we're done. If you don't fundamentally change policing the way it operates, that's not really going to matter. Somehow there has to be a way in which you change the culture, not just the policies too. And as said, there are ways that you can get out of reporting the data and what you're doing anyway. So even with RIPA, we have to be mindful of that. That's why the experience is so important, and I'm glad the UT covered the story about the brother getting pulled over. Surprise, he'd been pulled over 4 times in a year. It shouldn't have to come to that before we get the realization what's happening in our community and what's taking place. The one other thing I also want to add to this, to really clear about this, that I learned since I've moved here to San Diego, which is it's not just the gang. What you could see when I did the ride-along is all the other law enforcement operating. This was in the summer. The curfew unit, again, supposed to be for the entire city, surprise, surprise, with operating in Southeast. You could see all the law enforcement there. If you're over-policed and you have that much law enforcement, then who are you going to end up arresting? Who's going to end up in jail? That's the point, whether it's you're looking at youth, you're looking at gang, or any other type of illegal behavior. If you have the police operating there, that's who they're going to catch. And that has to be included in this discussion if we're going to have a serious dent in the pretext stops. It's not this little narrow area. Thank you.
As we call Michael Rios, I'll suggest to any other speakers if you can stand more centered to the podium so that the camera catches you a little bit better. Right now it's kind of sort of cutting some folks off, and we certainly don't want that. As far as their visual, the audio is fine. But, okay, Mr. Rios.
So I don't know where to begin. I don't have no faith in you, Scott Wall. I can't call you a chief, because you're not a chief until you make change. Make change in the culture of SDPD, You're embedded in the DNA. You've been in San Diego PD for many years. So until you can make change, our community has no faith in you. I don't feel comfortable driving in my neighborhood in Shelltown. But when I'm going to work in La Jolla, 'cause I work at UCSD in La Jolla, I feel safe. It's kind of weird. San Diego PD drives me all the time going to work in La Jolla. They never look at me. They never stop me. When I'm driving National Avenue, they're constantly busting U-turns to pull me over. But when I'm in La Jolla, driving to work, they never bust a U-turn, not one time. Never look at me, never pay attention. I'm the same person in La Jolla as I am in Shelltown. So you need to change the culture. Pretext stops. Your officers have tinted windows, illegal. So why are you guys pulling over our community for the same exact reason? You know, I agree with the moratorium of the pretext stops. But until there's a culture change in your department, like you did with your leadership team, you made a change. Make a change with the racism in your department. Do that change. And then we'll see a difference.
Thank you. Next, we'll call Tasha Williamson.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for doing this today and having community come out and speak. I really appreciate that. It's super important. It's super important that community is heard. Nicholas Hoskins couldn't be here today, but somebody will be reading his letter. And Travis Stocking Jr. couldn't be here today as well. One was stopped in a vehicle, one was stopped on foot. The drunk tank was used for this individual, Travis Stocking Jr., because he did not comply with the officer's command right away. The officer commanded him to get off the street, and he was trying to get off the street, but as you know, downtown during Comic-Con, there are arcades and there are food places that have sidewalks where you can eat out on the street. On the sidewalk, it was blocking him to get on the street. So once he got on the street, Officer Paradis decided to surround him with his other bike team officers. So you heard about Special Operations Unit, but bike team officers ought to be Special Operations Unit because they operate very similar. Their tactics are the same, and they abuse their powers. Officer Paradis decided that he wanted to arrest Travis Stocking Jr. and tank, even though he wasn't drunk. The officer who drove him to the drunk tank even said to the employees at the tank, "He's not drunk. I don't know why he's here." So we will be filing a complaint on that. But furthermore, what we want the community to understand is that the district attorney, the city attorney, the U.S. attorney is not on our side. They are saying that we have to push civil litigation when officers commit crimes. And Scott Wall, I'm saying to you that you as the chief, the head of this snake, you need to start opening up slots. You need to make a stand with your officers in this community on what kind of chief you will be. Are you going to be the chief that allows his officers to abuse their powers and violate laws and our rights every single day? Or are you going to put them under arrest, as one person here asked for a citizen's arrest and was denied that by Sergeant Baker just recently after he was assaulted by your officer? It is time for DA, city attorney, U.S. attorney, and Scott Wall, the chief, any chief, to open up slots, start putting handcuffs on the criminals that are in your department. Because it is beyond pretext stops. They are abusing their power with resisting arrest, delaying. They are using that as a way to put people in jail. They are not just using pretextual stops. You are at risk. You are putting more of your officers at risk because there are people who do not give a damn about your lives because you don't give a damn about theirs.
Thank you, Ms. Williamson. Next, we will call Curtis Swafford.
I just want to say I've been in this community 54 years, and 3 minutes is not enough. First, I want to go back to, let's go back to 2012. I was stopped in my neighborhood by the police. They pulled me over and said I was obstructing traffic. Nobody was behind me. when I pulled over, they couldn't even find a reason to give me a ticket. And they told me, if you let us search your car, we won't give you a ticket. The only reason why they asked me that is because I've been in trouble before for drugs. I told them, no, I'm not on paperwork. Anyway, went to court, fought it. The judge told me that they violated my rights and threw it out. Here we go back to 2024. I'm driving on Imperial. The police are towing somebody's car on the other side of the street. But they see me on my motorcycle in traffic. They leave that car, make a U-turn. Now, they can't see my plates at all. What did I do? I'm in traffic. But as soon as they see me, they get in the car, make a U-turn, pull me over 7 blocks down the street. Pull me over. The officer gets out of his car, walks right up to me on my bike, and just starts searching me. Didn't say, this is what I stopped you for. What's your name? I'm officer. No. Walked right up to me and just started patting me down. I asked him, why are you doing this? He said, because I've stopped people with motorcycle vests on before, and they've had guns on them. I'm not on parole or probation. So I'm literally scared of the police like that man just said. You guys scare me. I'm just like him. I don't want to ride my bike. I don't want to drive my car. That's ridiculous to get stopped for nothing. They were on the other side of the street. They couldn't even see my plates. What was the reason for busting a U-turn on me? Why? So what I think is they need to start hitting y'all's pockets. Hit y'all's pockets, break y'all's pay, then y'all start backing up. That's what they need to do. I've seen the police hurt people. They've killed my best friend. Choked him on 45th Street Park. Killed him. It's over. All right? I've seen police do tremendously horrible things. And it's always in this community. Always. It has to stop. It has to stop. It's a shame. You know, when the police tell you, we looked on your rap sheet and we see you've been in trouble for drugs before, so can we search? If you're not on parole or probation, that shouldn't even come out their mouth. That's horrible work. Horrible work. And if you're the chief, you need to do something about that. But as for myself, I'm just disgusted because I work every day just like the police. I'm an alcohol and drug counselor. I help people just like you help people. So if I go to work and I deny somebody help and they get on drugs or kill themselves, that's just like the police pulling me over and killing me. Fix yourself. Fix your department. It's horrible. It goes way, way back. It's not just starting now. It goes way back. I had a friend that got shot in the back by the police on Logan many years ago. Dead. Police come to my neighborhood on Solola. I've seen, I ain't gonna say no names, officers pull up, take off their stuff and want to fight. It's ridiculous.
Thank you, Mr. Swafford. Thank you. Before we call the next speaker will be Musla Abdul Hafez. I will call, just for preparation purposes, the next 5 afterwards will be Lori Saldana, Colleen Cusack, Danny Antiki, who will be ceding time to Colleen Cusack, Francine Maxwell, and Darnell Foster. So with that, as looks like we're fixing some video feed over there. Hold on one second. In the meantime, Musla Abdul Hafez.
Good evening. My name is Musla Abdul Hafiz. I was raised in Southeast San Diego since I was in the 4th grade. My first encounter with the police was when I was in the 1st grade. I was running home to go watch the Martin Show, and we got stopped. We got thrown on top of the car, and all that little crazy stuff like that there. But I grew up into an adult now. I'm the owner of the Avenue 619, is the clothing store on Imperial Avenue. I am the founder of the Life Movement, which brings together community members from all over Southeast San Diego. We all get together and make Southeast San Diego a better place. I provide free clothes throughout the year. During the floods, I provided free sandbags and helped the families clear out their all the little junk stuff in front of the house. I am the founder of the Southeast Accountability Unit, provide support to community members when people are stopped by police. We provide training, know your rights training classes, and we help people fill out complaint forms on police officers. I'm sorry. with many other. I am also the founder of Southeast Accountability Unit, where we provide support for the community and stuff like that there. I'm sorry, I apologize. It's my first time, so it is what it is. Southeast Division officers, I'm here for the, you know what I'm saying, the special operations gang. They harass my business all the time. You know what I'm saying? The special operation tactics against me and my family, they have stopped us for tinted windows. They detained us for prolonged stops. Special operations officers have very controversial contacts between me and them. They continue to harass me and my family. On January 13th, 2024, Officer Scromes tapped me with his vehicle in front of my business. I asked him to call for a sergeant. He just drove off on me. On countless times, Scrone has harassed me in the parking lot of my business without his body cam on. He uses remarks like, "I'll be back. I could do whatever I want to do." I have that all on video. And that's how they get down. And Officer Voxell and Vosalero, I'm the guy that they hit in front of the store. They went viral on the internet. Well, Officer Vosalero and drove by my store and turned around on Imperial. Officer Vosalero tapped me again. This is the second time I was hit by a police cruiser in front of my store. Officer Vosalero tapped me with her patrol vehicle, then drove off while I was laying on the ground, asked for her to get her supervisor. Special Operations Unit, again, the PSU protects their officers. Officer Voxell has a history of harassing me and complaint. We can file. These are the same officers for years and years and years, harassing me. My mother, my daughter's mother, my 3-year-old. They shut my business.
Sorry to cut you off.
Stole stuff out of my store. I kindly got my stuff back with no violence. They took me to jail. They left my 3-year-old. They took me to jail for a fake warrant. They left my 3-year-old with a stranger. This is what they do. They do that because you can come. I got the Unity store. You can come file a complaint on the police at my store. You can't just buy clothes and do other things like that. But you can come file a complaint. That's stuff we never had when I was growing up.
Okay, sir.
I grew up in the Bonnie Dumas era. And it's cold.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Next, we will call Lori Saldana.
Good evening. My name is Lori Saldana. I'm a lifelong San Diego resident, but for a time my family lived in Virginia. And listening to some of the stories of these stops reminds me of a situation in my own family where my father was driving our family and was pulled over and wound up being taken to jail. And I was just a young child. This is the first time I've talked about it. And so the pain that is being expressed by people is it's embedded. It's very real. I had the honor of representing San Diego in the legislature, and I worked with law enforcement around the state to make our communities safer and reduce hate crimes. And I only had a chance to get started before I termed out, but I've tried to continue my work on things like calling for a state audit of the conditions of jails in San Diego County a few years ago. I believe in using audits to uncover not only for accountability and transparency and forensics, but to really determine where our systems are badly broken. And what that state audit determined was our jail system is badly broken. And every pretense stop is putting a person closer to going into a jail system that is more dangerous than almost any other jail system, not just in California, but in the country. So I think, as the police chief is sitting here, I really encourage you. We have an officer shortage, we know that. And we are seeing data that these pretense stops result in a waste of time and money of officer resources. And they traumatize our community. So just from a resource perspective, to have officers engage in this behavior to waste time on people who are less likely to have contraband seems a horrible abuse of the few officers that we have at a time of officer shortages for various reasons. So just looking at it from the perspective of a state audit, I would suggest that it could be beneficial. We've had studies, we've had research, but to look at the dollars and cents of what it means to have an officer pull someone over disproportionate to their numbers in our community, and then time after time not find evidence of any wrongdoing or contraband. It is not only offensive, it is not only threatening and traumatizing to that person, that family, that community that cares for them. It is wasting our budget, which is the largest part of the city budget in the city of San Diego for policing. So I look at this from a personal perspective, but also from a forensic and accounting perspective. And I encourage the chief and others to look at the cost of what this is, not just on our lives, not just on our bodies, but on our dollars and the stress it puts on our budget, quite frankly. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will call Colleen Cusack. Ms. Cusack's going to have time ceded to her, so if we could put 6 minutes. 6 minutes. And for the record, Danny Antiki, I'm sorry, I'm not probably saying the name, sorry about that, is ceding his 3 minutes to Colleen Cusack. So with that, allow us to get 6 minutes on the clock for you. And your time begins now.
Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Colleen Cusack. I've been a criminal defense attorney for 31 years, and I was the founder of the Pro Bono Traffic Court Clinic. In this capacity, I've seen firsthand that police and the courts treat minorities different than their white counterparts. I have 3 recommendations for you. Please, I need you to take your pens out and write these down. 3 recommendations which, if implemented, would reduce the negative outcomes flowing from racially biased policing, and these aren't currently being addressed or considered. First, city attorney oversight of infractions. Second, production of body-worn camera for all persons cited with infractions. And 3, automatic review of citations issued prior to the officer shift change, which is used to manipulate mandatory overtime pay. Infraction court, also known as traffic court, is the negative outcome that perpetuates the systemic injustice of racial profiling. More minorities, disproportionate to the population, appear in infraction court than their white neighbors. This has consequence to their wages and exposes them to possible warrant. They are entitled to an attorney in this courtroom, but not a court-appointed attorney, so it also takes advantage of poverty. 85% of the criminal filings in the state and in the city are filed as infractions, not as misdemeanors and not as felonies. The city attorney in San Diego ceased reviewing infraction issuance in 2016 when Mara Elliott took over the position. Body-worn cameras are everybody is entitled to receive the body-worn camera evidence in infraction court, but I am the only one that's able to get this because the city attorney and the police are refusing to provide it, and the only way the court will order it is if a formal motion is filed. So I'm the only one that's getting that on behalf of my clients right now. The police use it when it helps them without providing them in advance. This is trial by ambush. The police suppress it when it doesn't help them. The promise of the body-worn cameras was that it would keep police misconduct in check. And when the police have the complete control over when that gets provided and when it doesn't, it ceases to provide that function. It's not an effective check if in 85% of the cases that evidence is suppressed. Mandatory manipulation of overtime, this is a practice that's long happened. When I taught students at the University of Phoenix, I had police officer students who bragged to me about having figured this out back when they removed discretionary overtime and went to only mandatory overtime. They've stopped someone when they're about to change their shift, and they stop a bunch of people for bogus tickets. That has to be bogus because they have to make sure that the person will demand a trial. When they are subpoenaed to testify, then they're going to be on another shift, they're going to be off duty, they're going to be paid for 4 hours even if they're only there for 15 minutes. When their case is called, the officer wearing a suit and not his uniform stands up and says, "Oh, I can't remember anything that happened. I have no independent recollection." You know, there's of course a body-worn camera of the evidence that could refresh his recollection. And so the officer is permitted to make a motion in court, it's not an attorney, motion to dismiss the case as a result. This is easy for you as a commission to investigate by demanding all the times that police officers has appeared off duty and that case has been dismissed. Review all those citations. You can also, if the city attorney was reviewing these cases as it should be, these are the cases that they should be reviewing each and every time. The cases that are issued that will require the officer to come when off duty. So to review, city attorney oversight of infractions, that has to happen. Right now, the police have a playground in traffic court. Everything they issue, they know will have no oversight from the prosecutor. They can get away with everything except the cases I'm appearing on. 2, production of body-worn camera for all persons cited with infractions. This should be as a matter of course when the citation issues, a letter is generated indicating how that individual can access this body-worn camera evidence in advance. Those 2 things alone will deter a lot of police misconduct, but 3, automatic review of the citations issued prior to the officer's shift change, which is going to be used to manipulate mandatory overtime pay. And that last one's going to reduce the amount of money we're paying big time. Thank you for your time. Mr. Honore has information on how to contact me if anybody in this commission wants additional information. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will call Francine Maxwell. Ms. Maxwell? Bear with us 1 second. 1 second.
I see you.
Okay, hold on. We'll get that 3 minutes up there, and then you'll be good to go. All right, you're good to go.
Thank you. Francine Maxwell, Southeastern San Diego resident, SDSU, Center for Policing and Equity, Campaign Zero. We have the reports, we have the data. So although the presentation was good, it was too long. It cut into the community time. And so I need the commissioners to make sure that every commissioner is reviewing. So I know that there's people being trained, but we need everybody reviewing everything. We also need some outside meeting times. That means that you set up a pop-up shop in the barrio so that my Latinx brothers and sisters can do their complaints in their community in the comforts of their own home. I need the commission to come out of the 4 walls. Appreciate you coming and doing this here tonight in Southeastern San Diego, but you have the capacity. You are hiring investigators, you have staff. The executive director can show up somewhere and let the community do their complaints in their community. Downtown, you know you guys got that pretty office, but maybe people aren't going to be able to come downtown. So please consider and market so that our community knows where they can go to the Malcolm X Library in the back. Also want to make sure that we have a conversation in reference to the stops, that we are not going back to curbing. We have a lot of young men and women that are recent out of the academy, so they may not understand that we do not sit on the curb. We lean on the front of the car. And so we want to make sure that that memo gets out expeditiously. We need the communication with the community to understand that there will be 2 cars at a stop. But when it's 4 and 6, they need to know that they will be dismissed and they will go back into service. So it's all about communication. We need to have more memos that are internal become external. We need to communicate more. There are some things that are moving. Southeastern San Diego has a new captain. He was here as a lieutenant. And so he was able to see some things, see something, say something. But now that he's in charge, oh baby, the expectation is higher. And so the needs still are the same, but they will be handled differently now because there's a different set of eyes. There's a different lens. And we need to make sure, I'm hearing stories that officers are putting their hands on a black man. That's my son. And so as his mama, You put your hands on my son, I'm going to put my hands on your son. So once again, there's a breakdown in communication. We all know some de-escalation techniques. Summer Steffen paid a grip of money up and down and around this county to train everybody on de-escalation. So I'm asking the commission, if the complaints are low, find out why they low and get out in the community so we can raise these complaints. Thank you for your time.
And prior to calling Darnell Foster, I will real quickly address Ms. Maxwell's concerns. Yes, we want to get out in the community. Ms. Abed and myself want to be in the community. Tell me where to be, tell me when to be, and I'm there. Thank you very much. With that, Darnell Foster, and before Mr. Foster starts, I'll read the next 5 that should be prepared. Gina Burns, Bromusla Life Movement, HFF, my apologies, and Karen Van Dyke on behalf of Nicholas Hoskins and Shamiko Harris. Those will be the last 5 in person who will speak after Mr. Foster. And with that, Mr. Foster.
Hi, my name is Darnell Foster. I'm a resident of Southeast San Diego, been here all my life. On January 1st, I was pulled over by the San Diego police after they followed me for about 20 blocks. And they pulled me over for window tint, but not the window tint that you think. So my car came with window tint across the front windshield, and it's like 6 inches, whatever it is, right? And he pulled me over for that and said it was illegal, right? But you can't take it off. That's the way I bought the car. So he pulled me over, and he started asking me questions. Do you have any guns in the car? Do you have any drugs in the car? Is this car registered to you? He had already ran my my plates, so he already had my ID, so he knew the car was registered to me. Then he began to tell me that since I wouldn't answer his questions, that I had to get out the car. I said, get out the car for what? Because I don't want to answer your questions. So he called for backup. They took me out my car, put me in handcuffs, searched my car. Searched my car. I did not give them consent to search the car. They searched the car. Right? Didn't find nothing. There was nothing in the car. And that was my first time being in contact with the police since 1995. I had no police contact since 1995. But yet and still, they snatched me out of my car and did all this, you know? And I don't understand it, you know? And I don't think I ever will, you know? And all the experiences that I ever had with police has been bad in Southeast San Diego. Right? But when I wasn't here, you know, when I was living somewhere else, it's a different atmosphere. It's different. So, you know, I don't think, me personally, I don't think much is going to come out of this meeting because it's the same stuff every year. It's just, you know, you're pulling us over, you're killing us, you know, you're shooting us unarmed, and then you find it, oh, it's a good shooting. You know, and we're just dying, you know, and you know, like if a person tells the police no, right, then you're wrong, right? So, you know, when we assert our rights, we're wrong, right? Can we search your car? No. Well, why? You got something in it? You know, so, you know, a lot of people in the community say we don't even talk to the police when they pull us over. Here goes my ID, here goes my registration, here goes whatever you need, and that's it, you know? And then you guys still find something wrong with that. Oh, you don't want to talk to us, so we're going to search your car. Come on, man, we got to do better. Somebody got to do better. Somebody got to do something. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Foster. Next, we will call Gina Burns. All right, Gina Burns. Oh, there you are.
Hi, my name is Gina Burns, and my initiative, pardon?
Just pull the mic down just a little bit. Thank
My
you.
initiative is Moms Against Torture. My son Jeremy Smith, last March, he has, first of all, he has severe mental illness. He has schizophrenia, learning disabilities, ADHD, and he's been in prison his whole life, and he's been abused and tortured and exacerbated. Last March, I had to call the police in El Cajon for 5150. We finally got him to go to the psych unit. Then they were taking him to the Alpha Project. He ended up at the hospital that night because he OD'd off his own medication. He was out in the streets, lost in the cold, and he went to a police officer to get help. He seen the police officer, and I'm grateful he didn't shoot him because he's 6'4" and black. That's not a good thing today, okay? So what happened, he's in jail right now for attempted carjacking. Who in the heck carjacks the police with a police officer there? Make that make sense. So he's there now looking at 25 to life over some BS, okay? And then, and I'm not gonna let that happen, but in 2018, my other son that has, he's bipolar, and of course he's used drugs, and he was in psychosis. In La Mesa, the police shot him not once, but twice, and tried to say that he was a threat. Yeah, he had a knife, he had it in his pocket, and he had a sheath, and he was no threat to anyone, but he looked scary, okay? So the whole thing went on, they shot him, the police were there, the traffic was stopped, and he's looking at life, and when we go to trial, come to find out the EDCO truck took footage of what happened. They lied. They shot him. The last cop that came on there, his name is Peter West. The last officer on there went there and just went gung-ho on him. Shot him in the arm and in the stomach. He's not dead today, but he's traumatized. He still needs help. When are we going to stop treating the mentally ill like criminals? When are we going to stop criminalizing the mentally ill and start getting help for our brothers and sisters? They're very vulnerable. This needs to stop. Enough with the brutalization of the mentally ill. They need help. They don't need to be criminalized and put in prison where they just get worse. Doesn't everyone have someone that suffers from mental illness? It's a direct cause of trauma, generational trauma. The police officers need to get educated because they don't have a clue. All they know what to do is to shoot.
Thank you, Ms. Burns. Next, we will call Bro Musla, Life Movement. Oh, you're HFA. I apologize. You're next.
My name is Alonzo Harvey, longtime community member. I got so much to say, but I only got 3 minutes. And I really want to talk to the officers. It's really the procedures and the policies, right? We have gang documentation. That's automatic pretext stop. Being a documented gang member in this community my whole entire life, I've been stopped ever since I was 12 years old. First time an officer told me was, "What are you doing hanging out with these guys? We go to school together." So that in itself got me associated to be a documented gang member. Probation and parole, right? These simple statistics. 1 of every 3 black men will be incarcerated. 1 of every 6 Chicanos will be incarcerated. So which leaves our communities full of people who are on probation or parole. Officers know that. So your gang unit saturates our communities real heavy. They get familiar with community members, and we're being stopped. Your procedure here says for consensual contact, which you should look at, it says officers are encouraged to initiate consensual contacts with individuals in the community. No, don't encourage that. We don't need you to walk up to us, stop us, ask us how we're doing. If you want to get, if you want to know the community, go to the local businesses and talk to them, right? Come to group meetings. We don't need you stopping us on the street and asking for, to get knowledge. It says community in order to gain more thorough knowledge of their beats and their community. We don't care about officers' beats. Your beats need not to be sitting in our communities, in our parking lots, watching us and watching what we're doing. That's not what consensual stops are. Also here it says, during the course of citizen contacts, officers should not ask about a person's probation or parole. You should put do not ask, because of course they should not, but they do it anyway, right? And policy says that if a person is on probation or parole, they have to answer that. So they should not, you don't ask that. And if you do ask that and we file complaints, where's the accountability at, right? So all in all, like Brother Darwin was saying, we could talk about pretexts all day, but pretexts are for black and brown people. The statistics are nothing new. Back when Myrtle Cole was city council, they did the San Diego State racial profiling. These statistics are still the same. Nothing has changed. The only thing that's going to change is the accountability on your officers. We file complaints, like the brother was saying. The black and brown community, I'm speaking now, really, is because I want to have the courage to do it in the sense of me knowing my rights, and I'm not scared of you guys anymore. But the fact that my homies would never show up to this. You know who gets the complaints? I do. My father does. My auntie Tasha does. Brother Darwin, Francine Maxwell. We get all the complaints, and we come to the community and as a hub and file these complaints. Because they won't come here simply because there's no accountability on you guys' end. So I encourage you, in my opinion, is you have to change your procedures and policies. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two more in-person requests to speak. Karen Van Dyke on behalf of Nicholas Hoskins.
My name is Karen Van Dyke. I am from San Diego, and I have lived here for 45 years. I just heard yesterday that a San Diego police officer put a gun to a teenage girl's head. I'm here to tell you the story, in his words, of Nicholas Hoskins. Maybe some of you saw that on Channel 8 and Channel 10, where the police officers stopped this guy. And he was so calm, and he said, "No, I'm not gonna get out of the car. I want to talk with you." They busted his window. I'm going to tell you now his story through his words. My name is Nicholas Hoskins. I'm here to talk to you about pretextual stops. Nicholas couldn't be here because he's at work. I don't know about you, but I've never had a positive experience with the San Diego Police Department. Matter of fact, my last encounter was one of the most traumatic. Not only have I been falsely accused of crimes I didn't commit, spent my 20s in a prison cell due to lies and misconduct by SDPD and prosecutors, this last time, officers decided to assault me, damage my property, and conduct an illegal search. All this because officers wanted to make sure I didn't have a weapon, detained me and released me with a misdemeanor ticket and court date. And guess what? No charges filed. Wasted time. Complete waste of time and city resources. They believed since I allegedly didn't come to a complete stop at a stop sign, they had probable cause to search for weapons or any other illegal contraband. No reasonable suspicion, probable cause, and no crimes in progress. Meanwhile, the average wait for a 911 response is 30 minutes to 36 hours. Maybe because the police are wasting staff and resources to harass the black and brown communities. Even though data shows that people of all shapes and colors are just as likely to be found with illegal contraband. This bias needs to be addressed to ensure everyone is treated fairly under the law. Thank you for your time. Racial bias needs to stop. Racism in San Diego Police Department needs to stop. Racial profiling needs to stop. SDPD should be hanging their heads in shame. Chief Wall, will it be business as usual, or will you be the answer of the change? Justice for all.
And finally, our last in-person commenter is Shimiko Harris.
Hello, everyone. Unfortunately, we under a state attack. We under a state of emergency as a black collective. Men, women, and children, we under attack. State of emergency. Ain't nobody safe here. I've been here all my life since Knox Elementary. 8 years old, walking to Knox early in the morning. We met the description at 8 years old. I'm about to go on and on and on. All these complaints, it shouldn't be one complaint, but we got hundreds. So, moving forward, Sagan Penn, remember him. Always remember him. That man had to learn how to fight and protect himself. He wanted to learn how to fight against 6 or 7 or several different men based on police used to come in groups to attack him just for the color of his skin. If you know the story and the brutal stuff what he went through his life, all the way to his death, he had to learn how to fight to protect himself against the oppressor, which was the police, the terrorists, okay? So make a long story short, so he got acquitted because he was protecting himself, but he was also, they was told that he was called an N-word. You know what I mean? So that's the whole thing. As they was beating him, they called him an N-word. He won that one. You know what I mean? So it's been hatred ever since. And I'm pretty sure that's why a lot of hatred, because they don't take an L. They can't lose. They're not going to fight when nobody one. They're not going to harass nobody one-on-one. They're going to take 20 of them at the least. Just on Sunday, we go up to Falmart. They just sit there and watch us like we're prey. But they're understaffed all the time, right? But they're never understaffed when they come in our community, though. Everywhere we go. Everywhere we go. I don't care if it's a 2-year-old's party. They're circling around. They're sharks and we're the fish. So I'm gonna leave you with this. I'm not gonna go on and on and on and on. But what's a gang member, quote unquote, to a terrorist, a racist terrorist who's here to kill us, destroy, and steal from us and do everything they can mentally, physically, and a special operation unit for what? We should be the operation unit on them because we shouldn't even have to police them. And we're the taxpayer, so why they answer to the chief who does nothing, but they all collide and collude and do everything together, and they got caught count endlessly. If you know the history of San Diego, it's the most corrupt place in the world. And I'm gonna say the world, because it's the smallest count of us with the most racist attacks. And that's in the court system, the CPS, every single system. But it starts with the pig. And I'm gonna call you a pig because that's what you are. A pig is the scum of the earth, and we're not the problem, you are.
Thank you. At this time, we have one request to speak online. Francis Yasmin Motawala.
Thank you. Thank you for holding this session. Thank you to the presenter who was really powerful, and I learned a lot in that presentation. One thing that I would like to know more about is whether or not there's any tracking of the newness of cars, the types of cars, how many Teslas are getting pulled over as compared to how many Toyota Camrys from the early 2000s. What are the class, where there's obvious race bias. My guess is if we were to look into some of the economic data, we would also see that there's a lot of just class bias and targeting of poor people, and that's just really sad. It's got to stop. Tonight, we did hear from at least a couple of community members who told stories about how they've been dealing with the same police officers since their childhood, how they've grown up in areas, and the first interactions with the cops were just, at a preteen age, and there was already a speculation of them being a bad, right? I really developed a commitment to seeking abolition after getting to know a friend in Staten Island who I heard stories of how him and his friends, the cops would just force them after school to sit on the curb and line up, and they would just harass them and beat them and whatnot. And that just, started the school to prison pipeline, the abuse that he suffered while in prison, and that he thought nothing more of his life after prison than that he was just going to be a thug for the rest of his life. And you know what? He had politicians who were exploiting his position, and they would actually reach out to him some business folks with property to do his dirty work and clean and harass people and keep the indigents out. So anyway, exploitation really is sad. As we celebrate Black August and we think about the revolutionaries, Black revolutionaries, freedom fighters who are currently imprisoned, that are put there based on lies that police officers told. We celebrate the movement for Black liberation and liberation for all here, and all power to the people.
Thank you. Chair, that concludes all requests to speak that were turned in by 5:30.
Thank you to everyone who shared their stories. I'm going to give Chief Wall an opportunity to say something if he is interested. Can we be sure his microphone's on, please?
Okay. First of all, let me thank you on the commission for bringing us all together here tonight and for volunteering your time to work through these difficult topics. Secondly, I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your day to be here. It's clear we got a lot of work to do, and we've got a long ways to go to restore trust. I want you to know that I'm committed to restoring trust and working together. And I realize for a lot of you right now that might not be good enough, and I acknowledge that. But I want you to know that I'm committed to being here tonight because it starts with listening and understanding where people are coming from. And so I don't want to take too much time talking, but I want you to know I'll be back, and we're going to continue working on these things. We just went through the last week the biggest change this organization has seen on record. And I started at the top because if I expect change at the front, then who am I to expect it if I can't do it at the top? So I made that change to send a message that we're going in a new direction. I will acknowledge the disparities exist, and I will tell you that I am not happy about them. None of us are happy about the disparities. And while we may have differences of opinions on how those disparities exist, what's important is that none of us are happy about them. And so we need to work together to have a more community-supported policing approach, because the intent on many of the cases and many of the things that we're talking about, the intent was to protect lives or to provide public safety. And I realize that the outcomes might be something different than what the intention was, but it's important that we take the time to understand those so that we can drive towards the outcomes that we can all be proud of. And it's going to include training. It's going to include continued focus on bias, and we all have bias. But when that bias translates into our actions, particularly in this profession, in policing, then that's a problem. That's a problem that I'm not going to tolerate. So these issues are difficult and they're challenging. I want to thank you again for coming out and sharing them. I realize it's difficult and emotional for many of you to do that. And I want to say we're going to continue working on these things, but they're going to take time. And I hope that you'll be with me working through them, as difficult as it will be. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Wall. I'm going to give an opportunity for commissioners to make comments. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand and we'll go around. Is there any commissioner who would like to speak? Commissioner Griffin Jones.
First off, I want to thank everybody who came through, especially folks who shared the names of loved ones who are no longer here anymore due to police violence and being murdered by law enforcement. I'm really sorry about that, and I want to let y'all know that we take this position seriously, and we do hold ourselves accountable to ensuring that y'all receive justice, and y'all should expect that from us. I want to lift up what I heard from folks that was very that was very moving is folks lifting up police officers bullying folks throughout their lives. The names of police that were mentioned, I'm really excited about our commission looking more into those police officers, and the moratorium on the stop for pretext stops. I think this is something that we should make happen. The recommendations that outside counsel Dwayne lifted up, the acknowledgement of desperate impacts of people of color, I think that that's super important that SDPD do ASAP. I think the holding accountable for those supervisors and officers who direct or order the pretext stops as opposed to officers simply complying with the director of order, I think that's important. And the other really important recommendations that were laid out in the slides. I want and I expect SDPD to adhere to these things. I also wanted to thank outside counsel Dwayne for your presentation, and I want to thank everybody too for showing, getting emotional, for showing feelings. A big part of why violence, especially violence that happens at the hands of law enforcement, it happens is because people say, I was just doing my job, or, or pushing back the feeling or acknowledgement of being human. Thank you for being vulnerable up there, and we want y'all to know that it's our responsibility, right, to take you all's words and for that to manifest into real actions. And then for community members, the policies that exist right now that the SDPD have, they're kind of raggedy, y'all. They're raggedy, to be honest. And we adhere to those policies when we get your complaints. And letting you all know that, because I really want to encourage folks to reach out to us individually or whatever way we can support you in familiarizing yourselves with the policies so that you all can continue to show up and do the amazing things y'all do and let us know how you want us to impact these policies.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
then, I just have one more point.
Okay.
So like the last point is, this body exists because voters in San Diego in 2020, y'all organized and y'all pushed back and y'all made us a reality. I want y'all never to forget about y'all power. Don't ever forget about it. Because of y'all power, it manifested this, and we are only able to do what we can do because of your power and support. So that's it. I'm complete.
Thank you, Commissioner Griffin-Jones. Commissioner Harvey.
Yeah, how you doing? I also want to thank everyone for coming out, being courageous to speak up on this topic, and being vulnerable and just being seen, and all those individuals that are out there that are putting their life on the line when they get calls or when they have to go and stand between community and police, and have to do the job that they're not really trained to do oftentimes, is de-escalation. I've been on numerous scenes like that, and it's pretext things. It isn't just people being stopped in their cars. There's pretext even when people are just standing around. I've been on scenes where people have been confronted about either loitering in a spot, and they've been, confronted and criminalized, and then, then the police just walk away from the scene. If the person is loitering or trespassing, then they don't do anything. They still leave the people there after they traumatize them. So those things need to be dealt with also. So we just need to continue to be vigilant. Just need to continue to be vigilant, continue to be out there. Again, I just appreciate those people Brother Darwin and Tasha and Musla and a lot of other individuals that put their life on the line every time they're out there to help bring light to these situations. Just want to thank everybody for that.
Thank you, Commissioner Harvey. Commissioner Armentrout.
Good evening, all. I want to thank everyone for coming out too. The knowledge that you're sharing, the emotion that you're sharing, the information that you're sharing is really critical to help us understand the community perspective and where to take that. We will have actions out of tonight's meeting. It was great that someone mentioned Sagan Penn. I'm currently reading that book, and somebody asked me last night, what has changed in 40 years? And I had a hard time answering them as to what has changed in 40 years. I am here for, as our motto says, oversight, accountability, and transparency. I would ask on behalf of the commission, transparency is key. The communications with internal affairs, the complaints, how they're adjudicated, the evidence that we see, we really need to see the entire packet of everything that's collected. Many times we're told certain evidence is not collected because it's not germane to a case. It absolutely is. And I think if we need to have some discussions on that with IA on what we're looking for, what is important evidence, why we need it, we have a job to do and we need that data, we need transparency, and we're here to serve the community, but also to enforce policies, procedures, and laws, and we need all the information to be able to do that. That's my ask. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Flores.
Hey everyone. So I grew up in this area. Like I went to Valencia Park, I went to O'Farrell, my family went to Lincoln. I mean, this has been an issue in this community since I can remember. Like even walking to school when I was a kid up the hill to Valencia, seeing people getting pulled over and people that look like me. And it's just a really tough place to be when you have your family that's, you know, impacted by this. It tells you stories about how they feel about it. And then you talk to your neighbor who's also had the same situation. And you become this community that's fractured, that really feels this pain and it doesn't go away. I would really hope that, that the chief looks at our recommendations in a few different ways, but focuses on the data, the way that we actually can understand how our officers can grow and become better and how we can keep them accountable to that. Just being part of these groups, being part of the case review team, being part of the police pursuit committee has shown me quite a bit more than I even knew. Than I even knew about this department to begin with. And I really appreciate how much I've learned, but I really feel that the collaboration, that willingness to support us in doing our best work is where we need to be with this department. That means complete honesty when it comes to us asking questions on our case reviews. That means providing all the information, not just the one that we asked for, the one that you said, oh, you know, they didn't ask for this, but let's give this to them because it'll help them. Like, just being able to support us, that should help the community. That should help you. That should be something that we should all strive for. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Flores. We have time maybe for one more comment. Commissioner Canson, and then we'll do Commissioner Justice, and then we'll have to wrap it up. Thank you. Commissioner Canson?
I'm Cheryl Canson, and I'm a San Diego native, and I'm a mother. I'd like to speak to the new chief. I'm a mother, and I raised my kids in Southeast San Diego, and I just want you to know that I don't think he's listening. I want you to know that I have sons, and I don't feel safe with them on the streets. Whenever they leave the house, I worry. I just don't feel safe, and I know a lot of parents feel the same way. When my kids were stopped, they were in mental health crisis. They were in psychosis. And I just wish that San Diego PD would identify a person in our community, even when a family member calls and says that they need a wellness check. They want their loved one to be checked on for their well-being. I wish you'd be more careful and really map out how you plan to move forward and help and advocate for people experiencing mental health needs. They don't need to go to jail. They don't need to be escalated and made worse. They need treatment and someone to care for them. They need an empathetic ear, a compassionate ear to respond. I just wish you'd make us feel more safe for our kids. We love our kids. I'm sure if you have kids, you love your kids. Put yourselves in our shoes. I can't take my kids off of the streets because they deserve to, be kids and be with their friends and just like all kids. So I just ask that you please try to make our streets safe for our families and our Black families and our Latino families and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Canson, for sharing such personal information. Commissioner Justice, and then we'll wrap it up.
Thank you to members of the public who came out in person this evening, and to those who called in. Thank you to Chief Wall for being here tonight. Congratulations on your appointment. I'm kind of a simple guy. One thing I just want to mention is a lot of these pretext stops could be avoided if, and don't take me the wrong way on this, but if you keep your vehicles in good working condition, make sure your headlights, tail lights, brake lights, turn signals are working. They're just simple checks, and because I know I'm in the auto repair business, and if you when you get in your car at night, just make sure your tail lights are working, your headlights are working. I hear you, but I'm just. Yeah, so that could help eliminate some pretext stops.
Respect here, or we're going to have to.
Yeah, but with all due respect, that was a hurtful thing that was said
All right,
for a community.
we're done with comments. Thank you.
With all due respect.
All right. On behalf of the commission, I want to thank everyone who came to share their testimony tonight. It was quite touching, and we appreciate you taking the time to tell us what's happening in the community. We also thank San Diego Police Chief Wall and Commander Kelso for attending to listen. Tonight's community hearing was just the first step in looking at pretext stops. We know it affects the community. It affects the trust the community has or doesn't have in the police. We welcome all stakeholders to continue to share their experiences. At our next regular meeting in 2 weeks from tonight, on Wednesday, August 21st, we'll meet at our Balboa Park location. The commission will determine the process of how to move forward with the eventual goal of making thoughtful recommendations to the chief. We want to look at statistics, we want to look at research, we want to look at best practices from other departments, because when we make these recommendations, we want them to be well thought out. We look forward to working collaboratively with the department, and of course, we will publicly share any recommendations we present to the department so that everyone knows where we stand. Please note that we have future community hearings that will focus on the protest policy, Fourth Amendment waivers, Special Operations Unit, and de-escalation policies. We will publicize the dates of these upcoming hearings once they are finalized. Again, thank you for coming out. This adjourns tonight's community hearing. Need to disperse the meeting. The meeting is over. Thank you.